Santa brought the Packers a playoff berth. Grossi Posse Packer Nation. Welcome to an episode of Podcast, the podcast where you don't have to be Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom. Hoping to find some playoff wins under the tree this year. Grossi, and today we are going to be breaking down and ranking the top 10 teams heading in to the penultimate week of the 2024-2025 NFL regular season. And craziness abound. There's a bunch of movement. We got a new number one. The top five are shaking up a bit. And so, with only 2 weeks left in the regular season, let's frackin' get it. Starting off with an honorable mention. And I know they were honorably mentioned last week, but we got to do it again. It is the LA Rams. The Rams knocking off the New Jersey Jets in what was not the prettiest of games, but the Rams did themselves a big favor being the only team to win in the NFC West this past weekend. They're in firm control of that division. They have to play the Cardinals this Saturday, and of course, a big game looming with the Seahawks. But if the Rams can keep on winning, they are going to clinch the NFC West, guaranteeing them a playoff spot, and we're going to see them in January. And so, as of right now, remain an honorable mention for beating the Jets, and we'll see if Stafford and company can win some games in the postseason. Starting off with number 10. Welcome back, Wildflower. You got the Washington Commanders. The Commanders. Jaden Daniels led his team down the field at the end and beat the Philadelphia Eagles.
You did it. You crazy son of a bitch, you did.
And we'll talk about the Eagles in a hot minute, but the Commanders able to get the job done. Jaden Daniels, 5 touchdowns on the day, potentially sealing himself as Offensive Rookie of the Year, and the Commanders getting one step closer to clinching a playoff spot. And I know Eagles fans and Commanders fans have been chirping at each other since Sunday. I know Jalen Hurts got hurt, out with a concussion. Hopefully he recovers well soon. And they had to beat Kenny Pickett, who didn't look the worst. But the Commanders still got a big divisional win, putting the Eagles' chances at the 1 seed definitely in jeopardy. And for the Commanders, they're not going to care what kind of Eagles team that they beat because they still got a major division win. The Commanders have a big-time game against Michael Penix Jr. on Sunday Night Football against the Falcons, which should be a pretty damn good game. And even though the Commanders committed 5 turnovers, the fact that they were able to still win that game and march down the field against that Eagles defense, who was really damn tired after all that, is still impressive. They still deserve a spot in the top 10 as the Eagles win streak has finally come to an end. And so because of that, Wildflower, welcome back to the Power Rankings. I'm sure you're happy. Number 9, welcome back the LA Chargers. Yeah, the Chargers had to pull out a fair catch kick at the end of the first half. It was the first time that it was successful since the 70s, when the last time the Chargers did it as well. And they were able to knock off the Denver Broncos on Thursday Night Football, getting one step closer to the postseason. It's near guaranteed that LA will find themselves playing in January. And after all this, in the words of Harbaugh, the worm has turned. Just ask the Broncos.
I'm winning, SpongeBob!
Sandy, that's not the worm. That's his tongue.
Run for your life!
But the Chargers deserve a lot of credit for that win, and I know the Broncos defense a little bit beat up right now with no Riley Moss, but Justin Herbert looked phenomenal in that game. Yes, they had Ladd McConkey, but still without J.K. Dobbins, and Gus the Bus Edwards having his best game in the past few weeks as he was limited to under 40 yards the majority of those games, but here had 2 touchdowns over 65 yards and had a little bit more of a balanced attack on offense. And listen, I don't think the Chargers are going to be Super Bowl bound this year, but I think they deserve a ton of credit for what Harbaugh has done with that organization and made them super competitive year one to the point where they're on the brink of the playoffs. And honestly, who knows? Depending on how seeding shakes out, the Chargers could wind up making some noise in the postseason. They swept the Broncos this year. They deserve a top 10 spot, which gets them at number 9. And by the time January rolls around, we'll see if Harbaugh can pull off some magic.
The worm has turned!
Number 8. You got the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers tumbling down a few spots after losing to the Baltimore Ravens. And I want to say a couple things. One, obviously the Steelers are a beat-up football team right now. Taking a look at their secondary, George Pickens didn't play. But the biggest problem with the Steelers going up against the Ravens was Russell Wilson turning the ball over and looking like his former Denver self.
What have I done?
And it was just a bad game for Russell Wilson and company. And while the Steelers kept it close for at least a little bit, kudos to the Ravens for able to get that big win. Derrick Henry, an absolute monster on the ground. Lamar Jackson is playing well. And I don't think it's doom and gloom for the Steelers, who have a short week and are going to be playing tomorrow on Christmas against the Kansas City Chiefs. I do think that is going to be a very tough game, but Steelers fans have kind of been anticipating this because they had to go through the gauntlet. And right now for Pittsburgh, their main concern is sealing off the AFC North and winning that division, which is definitely in jeopardy. We'll see if the Ravens are going to be able to win out, as they are also contending for that same spot. But as of right now, the Steelers remain in the top 10. I'm very curious to see how they play against the Chiefs. George Pickens should be back, and already they clinched a playoff spot, so we will be seeing them in January. So it remains to be seen if Steelers are actually going to go to Super Bowl. Number 7, you got the Green Bay mother-loving Packers. Moving on up a spot as the Packers demolished the New Orleans Saints. And that Packers defense got the first shutout of the NFL season.
We'll get rid of those scores right now. We will, of course, add them to whatever the...
Hey, Brad's score's still on there.
And listen, talking about beat-up football teams, the Saints are decimated when it comes to injuries. They're on their third-string quarterback. They got Jamal Williams and Miller. I do love Jamal Williams. Back at running back. And yeah, it was going to be tough for them to win this game. But the Packers deserve a ton of credit, especially on defense. They forced 2 turnovers. They held the Saints to under 200 yards. And holding any team to 0 points is difficult to do in this league. I mean, hell, it was the first time it's happened this season. And taking a look at the offensive side of the ball, all 3 running backs had a touchdown on Monday night. Jordan Love continued to play well. He hasn't thrown an interception in 5 weeks. And the Packers have clinched a playoff spot, meaning that they will be playing some meaningful football in January. And right now, I don't think there's a team out there that wants to play the Packers. I think they can go toe-to-toe with anybody. Of course, we didn't have Quay Walker. We didn't have Evan Williams, Javon Bullard, or Jair Alexander. So hopefully that secondary and that defense gets a little bit healthier as we get closer to the postseason. And Christian Watson suffering an injury on Monday night. But overall, the Packers are looking really damn good. They have a date with the Minnesota Vikings, the purple incarnation of Satan, on Sunday, which should be an amazing game. But right now, the Packers, they're rolling. They punched their ticket. And let's see how far they can go.
Stop playing around! Once again! Punch the ticket!
Number 6, you got the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens finally beating the Pittsburgh Steelers. They had lost their last 8 of 9 against Pittsburgh, but they finally exercised those demons, and Derrick Henry went 2 whole weeks without a 100-yard rushing game.
The king has returned.
But the king has returned. Derrick Henry having a phenomenal game against the Steelers, able to close that game out as well. And the Ravens, I think every Ravens fan knows this. They have the potential. Their offense can be multi-dimensional. Lamar Jackson is playing at an MVP-like level. It's just a matter of which Ravens team is going to show up on any given day. Yes, that Ravens defense definitely looked better over these past couple of weeks, but when they went up against teams like the Eagles, they were unable to get it done. Justin Tucker also looks like he is kicking better as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see as they clinch a playoff spot, how they go toe-to-toe with some of the better teams in the league once we get to the postseason. I think Ravens can go toe-to-toe with anybody, but hell, I said the same exact thing last year when they were the number 1 seed, and look what happened. So the Ravens have a ton to prove heading into January. They're going to get a chance to do that. And like I said, we'll see if the Ravens can get it done. Number 5, you got the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles tumbling down a few spots after losing to the Washington Commanders. And it's not really the loss that's dropping them a ton. It's more the fact that Jalen Hurts got injured, and we just got to see what his timetable to return is. But the Eagles, unfortunately for them, snapped their 10-game winning streak. And some Eagles fans think the world is ending.
The sky is falling! The sky is falling!
The sky is falling!
Are you crazy?
It's gonna be okay, I promise. The Eagles unable to get a win against the Commanders. Their defense still forced 5 turnovers, and Kenny Pickett, like I said, still had 2 touchdowns, did not look the worst, and I still think that Kenny Pickett, if he needs to play, can win some games for the Eagles, but ultimately, I think the Eagles are gonna be just fine. Not saying that you could plan these injuries or that they're ever welcome in any way, shape, or form, but at least it's happening now to Jalen Hurts instead of, I don't know, a week before the playoffs or during the playoffs. So the Eagles, I still think, are in fine position to at least capture the number 2 seed in the NFC. That means that the majority of the playoffs will run through Philadelphia, unless it's the 1 and 2 seed at the very end in the championship. But Saquon Barkley had himself another day. He's on the verge of breaking even more records. That defense did force 5 turnovers, but at times did allow the Commanders to walk down the field, including that last drive. I know they were exhausted, but looking a little vulnerable there. I would be very curious to see a rematch of these 2 teams in the postseason as they split during the regular season, and it might be gearing up to that exact matchup because if the Eagles get the 2 seed and the Commanders get the 7, we'll be seeing that on Wild Card Weekend. I know I would love to see it. I think Eagles fans would like some revenge, and maybe they're gonna get it. Number 4, you got the purple incarnation of Satan, the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings just keep on fracking winning. 13 wins for Sam Darnold and the Vikings. And listen, I got to give a ton of credit for Darnold. I got to give a ton of credit to KOC, who has done a great job managing that team, especially bringing the best out of Sam Darnold. And the Vikings, they clinched their spot last week. And at this point, they're just playing with house money, trying to cash in on that number 1 seed.
I gotta figure out how to make money on this thing. It's simply too good. I gotta figure out how to make money on this. I really want to.
They're simply too good to be a wild card team. Too good. I'm so happy I'm praising the Vikings. But the Vikings defense deserves a bunch of credit, getting that game-sealing interception against Geno Smith, and that Justin Jefferson is just an absolute monster. That final throw from Sam Darnold and catch by Jefferson for a touchdown was absolutely phenomenal. And now the time for talking is done because the Vikings, if they want to try and get that 1 seed or try and clinch the NFC North, they are going to have to win out. The first stop against the Green Bay mother-loving Packers and finishing Week 18 against the Lions. It's not going to be an easy 2 weeks for the Vikings, but I think we'll provide some insight on how good these teams really are. We're going to get 3 teams in the NFC North. The Vikings still trying to win that division. They'll have an opportunity to, but first, they got to beat the Cheeseheads. We'll see if they're able to do it. I pray that they're not. And ultimately, hopefully the Packers exercise those demons on Sunday. Number 3, you got the Kansas City Chiefs. Welcome back into the top 3, Chiefs, as they took care of business against the Houston Texans, and they still got to win 1 more to get that number 1 seed.
Still to be happy about.
You're up 2-0.
Job's not finished. Job finished.
And talking about that Chiefs offense, again, they are just grinding teams down. I know Tank Dell went out in that game with a horrific knee injury. Thoughts are with him, and hopefully he is able to recover and be back better than ever next season. As the Texans offense, they have been struggling. And after Tank Dell went out, it did not look good. But ultimately, the Chiefs defense deserves a ton of credit. They've been playing great pretty much all year. I know that their pass rush has been suspect at times. They've had some injuries there. And taking a look at that Chiefs offense, they got Hollywood Brown back, which definitely adds another wrinkle to that team. And Patrick Mahomes, while not having his greatest season, that offense is still really damn good to the point where they have only lost 1 game this season. And I feel like a lot of people, including myself, are like, all right, we're waiting for the Chiefs to take that next step on offense. But this might just be what the Chiefs offense looks this year. And guess what? It's 1 of 14 fracking games. And ultimately, this is just the preseason for the Chiefs because they are the most experienced team heading into the postseason. They already clinched the division. With a win on Christmas, they could clinch the number 1 seed, and the road to the Super Bowl would run through Kansas City yet again. And for all the other AFC teams trying to stop them, once that happens, good luck. Number 2, you got the Buffalo Bills. The Bills, woof, another close one for Buffalo, but in the end, they made it.
Another happy landing.
And Josh Allen did not have his best game. There was a lot of talk about his hand and his broken hand since week 1 and all this craziness. But ultimately, the Bills were able to put that game away. And the only reason they're ahead of the Chiefs right now is because, of course, when they went head-to-head, the Bills won. And I still think there's a lot to be excited about for the Bills as they head into the postseason. They already clinched their division, so nothing to worry about there. It's a long shot for them to get the number 1 seed. They're going to have the Chiefs lose out, one against the Steelers and then against the Broncos. And, of course, the Bills got to win out for the rest of their schedule. That shouldn't be too difficult for Buffalo as they're going up against the Jets and ending the season with the Patriots. But a little bit scary against New England. Did not play their best football game. But as we have seen this year, divisional games be crazy. So I don't think the Bills are going to be able to get that number 1 seed, but they will finish at 2. And who knows, that might set up for a phenomenal conference championship. Bills, Chiefs, and boy, oh boy, I'm sure the Bills are going to want some revenge against Kansas City. And the Chiefs are going to be looking to repay them for that loss earlier this season. And number 1... you got the Detroit Lions back in the top spot because they had a stumble-rooski, a fake stumble against the Chicago Bears. And Ben Johnson already nailed his interview with the Chicago Bears.
That took guts. We need guts.
You got a lot of problems, don't you?
The Lions taking care of business and making it look easy against Chicago, and I'm ranking them ahead of the Bills because they took care of their divisional opponent much easier than the Bills did. And Jared Goff had himself a great game, had 3 touchdowns, was near perfect on the day, and even without Montgomery and all the injuries on defense, they were able to make easy work against Chicago. And ultimately, the Lions are still in control of their own fate. They got a game against the 49ers on Monday Night Football, which I think is a very winnable game, and then of course their final game against the Minnesota Vikings could be for the division. It could be for the number 1 seed. A lot is at stake there. And I know Lions fans are praying they get that bye week because it is much needed to try and get a bit healthier. You might see some returning players in the playoffs on offense and defense, which would be a big boost for that Lions squad. But ultimately, even with all those injuries, the Lions still are sitting at number 1. They're the number 1 team in the NFC. And as of right now, they are still the best team in football. And so just to recap, at number 1, you got the Lions, 2 Bills, 3 Chiefs, 4 Vikings, 5 Eagles, 6 Ravens, 7 Packers, 8 Steelers, 9 Chargers, and 10 Commanders. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Who should be ranked higher? Who should be lower? Buccaneers, you could have been on this list, but you know what you did. Let me know. You can always find me at TomGrossiComedy.com or at Tom Grossi Comedy. Also, social media see down below. A big shout out and thank you to all the YouTube and Patreon members for supporting this channel. And thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. A very happy holidays to you all. And as always, go Pack Go.